Welcome everyone who has just joined. I'm going to do some quick introductions of myself and my colleague here. So my name is Leslie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions here at the School of Social Work. So I do both admissions and part of that is also doing scholarships and being on the scholarship committee. So I am very excited to see you all here and hopefully we can answer some of your questions and get you started thinking about some of the ways that you might make an MSW doable. And then I'll introduce my colleague, Montse.
Hi everyone, I'm so glad that you were able to join us tonight. My name is Montserrat, she, her pronouns. I am a first year full-time student for the MSW program, and I also get to support students in this role doing presentations and doing advising appointments. So if you have any questions in the future, you can also schedule an advising appointment with me.
Yes, thank you. Very glad to have Montse here. And we'll kind of be taking turns with the slides today. So before we get started, I do want to start off with a land acknowledgement. And this land acknowledgement, I'm hoping you've probably heard many before, but hopefully this one you will be able to learn something a little. If you're in the Seattle area, hopefully you still are learning something. And even if you aren't in the Seattle area, hopefully you will learn something about the land and ancestors here. So the Muckleshoot Indian tribe is a successor to the people and villages of the Duwamish and Upper Puyallup, who were party to the treaties of Point Elliott and Medicine Creek. The Duwamish peoples were displaced from their villages along the Duwamish, White, Black, Green, and Cedar Rivers, Lake Washington, and the Seattle waterfront when settlers arrived in the area and pushed them out through oppression, land acquisitions, and treaties. In 1857, a small portion of the land was set aside for Native peoples on a prairie in South King County called Muckleshoot, an anglicized version of the Lachute seed word. This small portion of land would later become the Muckleshoot Reservation, where many Duwamish ancestors moved to over time. The Duwamish Indian tribe is now one of South King County's largest employers and supports environmental protection, educational opportunity, and social services. And the tribe retains the treaty rights to hunt, fish, and gather throughout the region its Duwamish and Upper Puyallup ancestors inhabited for thousands of years. We proudly acknowledge the traditional stewards and custodians of the lands on which the University of Washington is situated, the Coast Salish people and all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations, and we pay respects to their elders, past, present, and future, and understand that social work's commitment to social justice must include Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. Relationships to ancestry and homeland are complex, so however you connect to your ancestors, may this be a moment to ground ourselves in shared respect for the land and all who have come before. Okay. So, just some bullet points of what we'll be covering today. The first is a brief overview of kind of our goal with this session and going over funding options. Then we'll talk about tuition, so you know exactly what you'll be funding. And then all the different types of funding we'll go over are listed there. And at the end, we will answer as many questions as we can. So as questions come up, put them in the Q&A, and then Monse and I will be able to answer them at the end. Like I mentioned, we're going to go pretty fast. This will be recorded and the recording will be sent out to folks and posted. So you can always refer back to this. But bear with us as we try to get through as much information as possible. So to go over our goals a little bit of this funding information session and just funding MSW students in general is to make sure that you know what your options are and that you can create choices for yourself. And by that, I mean you have as many options as possible that when you are deciding whether or not to come here, you can look through all your options and pick and choose what you want, and you don't feel like you're stuck and you wish you would have known X, Y, or Z. Also understanding the opportunities, so that is not only the funding opportunities, but also the opportunities of the field, the pay of the field, the versatility of the different careers, and the opportunity as a pathway to licensure, which can also increase your salary after graduating. And all of this, our goal is that you make a thoughtful, informed decision. We don't want you to make a decision that is financially not smart or will put you in a really bad spot. We want you to make a really good decision for yourself. And so maybe that means coming this year, maybe that means putting it off a couple years, whatever that means. We hope that you can make an informed decision. And so part of this is creating options, like I said, creating choice for yourself. And so my advice and advice that Monse shared as well is to just apply to everything you're eligible for. Start now, put alarms, make alerts on your calendars for when deadlines are coming up or when some application is open. You can also always view salaries of MSW grads or licensed MSW grads in the area, in the Seattle area, to see kind of what those career options are. And all of this, part of making a thoughtful and informed decision is tuition transparency. So that kind of brings me to the next piece, which is going over the tuition and fees a little bit. This is for this current year. So it's broken down by program, and then it's broken down by cost per quarter because UW is on the quarter system, and then it's further broken down by resident and non-resident. Once you become a student, your tuition rate is locked in, so it won't change over time. You'll notice that our full-time programs, the tuition is significantly discounted for Washington residents, and that's because the full-time programs are state funded and state subsidized, so residents get a discount, whereas the part-time programs are not state funded, so there's no discount for residents. So residents and non-residents are charged the same on a per credit basis. Um, so to establish residency, you need to have resided in Washington State for 12 consecutive months before the first day of the quarter. So if you expect to meet residency requirements by the time the quarter starts, which means you've already moved to Washington by now, then you can go ahead and apply as a resident. And if you expect to potentially become a resident later, then you would still apply as a non-resident for this current year. Okay. So the big categories of funding we're going to be talking about today, kind of from most broad to least broad, are external funding, UW specific funding, and then departmental or School of Social Work specific funding. So I'll start off with external funding, and this covers private loans, external scholarships, and off-campus jobs, among some others. So to start off with private loans, we really only recommend that you consider private loans after you've already explored the possibilities of financial aid loans. So those are Department of Education loans or Washington State loans, because they have better rates and better protections. So that's kind of our tip. There's also UW does not recommend any specific loan providers, but they do have a really great page that Monse can share in the chat about things to look for with a private loan vendor. And one thing to note also is that any private loans you take out are still calculated in your financial aid calculation, and they must be reported. So they will still pop up as a resource in your financial aid. And speaking of loans, some loan forgiveness programs that are out there that are separate from UW is the Federal Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. The National Health Corps Service Program is also national. And then specific to Washington State is the Washington Health Corps and the Indian Health Service. So all of these programs forgive a certain amount of loans or repay a certain amount of loans in exchange for you working in a specific field for a certain amount of time. And these are the ones that I've selected to share because they are the ones that social work grads most frequently qualify for, given that many social work grads end up working in nonprofit or public community service providers. So many of these could potentially provide good opportunities for yourself, either immediately after graduation or further down the line. And as of right now, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is still in effect, and it's still taking new applicants. And so for now, that is an option. The Washington Health Corps and the Indian Health Service, because they're Washington state specific, might be a little bit of a more safe bet in terms of any potential changes to student loan providers and that sort of thing at the national level. In terms of external scholarships, we do have a list of lots of different types of scholarships on our website. It's not an exhaustive list, but most of these are other search engines that you can use to look for scholarships. And then there are some specific ones for different population groups. We also have some that we keep just kind of as an informal list internally. So if you do make an advising appointment with Monse or someone else, then they might be able to offer some of those as well. These are, like I said, external. They're not affiliated with UW. And so the deadlines and application dates all vary. So this is one of the things that if you do look into them, be sure to note the dates and deadlines in a calendar or something like that to keep track for yourself. What are the other types of external funding opportunities are off-campus jobs. And this varies. It really depends what program you're in and how much time you have to dedicate to a job. And so here it is broken down by advanced standing, full-time and part-time programs to kind of get a sense of what might be possible. And while these are some general guidelines, it's ultimately up to you to decide the impacts of what working full or part-time during graduate studies would look like and whether or not that's the cost benefit to yourself. There are also, a lot of small like side hustle type jobs that grad students often find to be easy ways that are flexible, things like babysitting, that sort of thing, that can bring in some money in a more flexible schedule that suits students. Um, Similar to a job or working part-time is practicum. So practicum is a requirement of the MSW program. And some practicums are paid. Not all. We definitely encourage our practicum sites to pay their students, but ultimately it's up to each site to decide that. And so of the practicum sites that are paid, the pay really varies on whether it's hourly or a monthly stipend or something. And then there's separately kind of the option to have your practicum site at your place of employment. There's some specifics about how this would work, and it's not always super easy, but it is sometimes an option. And so if you are working somewhere and also have your practicum there, it doesn't necessarily mean that your practicum would be paid, but it does mean that it could make it easier, more flexible to work while in grad school. And another external funding option are some external tuition assistance programs. There's one through Veterans Affairs, and this is a pretty good one where they cover all of your tuition, they give you a stipend, and in exchange, you work for Veterans Affairs for a period of time after graduating. The application for that will open in January. There is also the Washington State Employee Tuition Exemption Program. And so this is if you are currently employed at least half-time by a Washington State agency. So that could be, local government, it could be a public school, it could be working for UW or another community college, a wide variety of things. Then you are eligible for up to 6 credits of free tuition every quarter. Again, there's some details and little nuances that are important to consider, but this is also an option if you are in a full-time program. And one to consider, especially if you are already currently employed by a Washington State agency. So That is very briefly some of the external options out there to look into, to start exploring. And we are now going to head over from external funding and go into UW-based funding. And I'm going to pass it over to Montse for this part.
Thank you, Leslie. Can you go to the next? Yes, thank you. So something that we like to mention to students when we talk about financial aid is that the aid that you got as an undergraduate student may be more than what you get as a graduate student. So there are a lot more state and federal programs for financial aid for undergraduate students. So the financial aid package that you get as a graduate student will be much more different than what you got as when you were an undergraduate student. Usually it's a lot less. So that is a reason why most students that are pursuing their masters do get loans once they start their program. Um, so the application for FAFSA and WASFA are currently open. I know that we're mentioning that you don't get as much funding, but it is still important that you submit that, and I'll say why in a bit. The priority deadline is on January 15th, so make sure to submit your application by then. It is important to apply for your FAFSA or WASFA because it is often a prerequisite for other funding. So if you're applying for scholarships or for assistantships, which talk about, you will need to have submitted your FAFSA or your WASFA. Um, your FAFSA, you would submit your FAFSA or your WASFA if you are a US citizen or a resident, and you would submit your WASFA only if you are an undocumented student or immigration impacted student. Um, if you don't feel comfortable submitting your FAFSA, you can submit your WASFA if you are a Washington State resident. So financial aid includes state grants. Sorry, Leslie, can you go back, please? Yes. Or it would be the next one, sorry. So financial aid includes state grants, federal loans, and work study. So if you have any specific questions about financial aid, please contact the UW Office of Financial Aid because Leslie and I are not experts on this. So like I said, if you're a Washington resident who is uncomfortable of submitting your FAFSA, but you do qualify for the FAFSA, you can submit your WASFA. However, you will miss out on federal aid that you could be eligible for. That's something to keep in mind. For grants are state free money. They are not loans, and it is only for Washington residents and full-time programs. And you can get up to $12,000 through FAFSA or WASFA. But even if you do qualify for the full amount, you would still have to cover more for the tuition. So that's when students usually have to get loans. Unfortunately, out-of-state students or part-time students would only be eligible for loans. Loans are for US citizens and some eligible non-citizens, and these are two types of loans. So we have the federal direct unsubsidized or federal direct graduate plus loan. You can get these through FAFSA or WASFA. However, if you are undocumented, most of the time you are not eligible for these loans. Something to know is that there will be no more federal direct graduate plus loan in the future. It ends on July 1st of 2026 for new borrowers. So students who have a graduate plus loan disbursed before July 1st of 2026 can continue to be enrolled in the same program and may continue to borrow up to 20,500 of direct unsubsidized loans and graduate plus loans up to the full cost of attendance through 2029. But that is one option that wouldn't be there anymore. So the option that would be for loans in the future would be just the federal direct unsubsidized graduate loan. And you can see that the interest rate is that you can take up to 20,500 per year, and the max amount that you could take out would be 138,500 combined with your undergrad and your grad education. Another type of funding is work study. However, it is pretty uncommon for grad students, but there are a couple of opportunities It is an hourly paid job, and you work with the UW Work Study Office to find an eligible position. You would work up to 19 hours a week at the max, and usually it is paid at 20 hours an hour. And you would have to submit your FAFSA or WASFA to see if you qualify for work study. So that's another reason why you should submit it by January 15. So this is a little graph that we have to show you what the steps would look like. So you would submit your application for our program as soon as possible. The deadline is January 15. Then you would also submit your FAFSA or WASFA by January 15. By February or March, you would have received an offer of admission from us. And early April, you would receive a financial aid package. By April 15, you either have to decide to accept the admissions offer or not. And then by May 1st, you would have to accept aid. If you would like to get any adjustments on your aid or you have any questions about that, make sure that you do that after you accept the aid. There are other on-campus jobs that are not work study, and they are also you work up to 19 hours per week per academic year. And you can find these through Handshake. You would only be able to see these after you are admitted into the program and you accept your offer because you need your net ID to sign in into Handshake. But the good thing is that these are also open to international students. We also have fellowships, which are scholarships. There are two types, the departmental ones, and so those would be like the ones that the School of Social Work awards. And then there's also the ones that come from the University of Washington in general. There's also external scholarships, but it is important that you submit your FAFSA and WASFA because a lot of them have that requirement. Some that pertain a lot to our students pursuing their master's in social work are, for example, the Latinx Scholars Graduate Fellowship, and you can find other ones at this website as well.
Great. So we have covered external funding options and some UW funding options, and then kind of the biggest, most specific chunk that we'll cover are departmental funding options. And so there are several different kinds. We'll start off first with fellowships. So just like once they had shared about UW fellowships, the departmental fellowships or scholarships, these are open to all students, so including undocumented and international students. We do require that you submit your FAFSA or WASFA by the 15th. However, if you're an international student, that requirement is waived. And to also please submit the funding consideration form by the application deadline. So the full-time and advanced standing program has an application deadline of January 15th. It's also the priority deadline for the part-time programs, but the part-time programs are open until February 12th. So please submit your application and submit your funding form by that deadline. When I say funding consideration form, what does that mean? It will show up after you submit your application. So after you submit your application, you'll see a screen that looks somewhat like this with a checklist of all your application requirements. And then right there at the top, you'll see the post-application questions. That is where the funding consideration form is included in. So please do not forget to do this. It's very important. You will miss out on being considered for many types of funding if you don't complete that. So very important piece. And then an overview of the timeline of how fellowships and when fellowships are awarded. So you'll receive an offer of admission if you're accepted between February and March. And then fellowships like financial aid are not sent out until after an offer of admission. So whereas sometimes you might be familiar with getting an offer of admission and your funding package in the same letter, you can expect to get an offer of admission and then a few weeks later receive any fellowships that you received and as well any financial aid you received. If you did not receive a fellowship, you will be notified either way in April. And then April 15th is our deadline for you to accept the offer of admission to the program. If you accept our offer, then between April and September, so between April and the time school starts, any fellowships that have been awarded to students that become available again, we will re-award them. So if you didn't get a fellowship in between March and April, there is still potentially a possibility that you could get a re-awarded fellowship later on. And then every spring, we send out another fellowship or funding application. And so if you are continuing on for a second or third year, you will get an opportunity to apply again for future years. Um, Some of the fellowships that we offer are specialized awards, meaning they are specific to specific areas of practice that you're interested in or specific merit that you might bring. Some might be just based on need. Some are specific to international students, and some are specific to non-residents, so people who don't live in Washington State or who moved to Washington State. About a third of our incoming students receive a fellowship, and the standard award is around $7,500, but they do range between 5,000 and 15,000. And so while a third of our incoming students receive a fellowship, over half, so 61% of all MSW students receive some type of funding in the form of fellowships over the course of their MSW. And this year we awarded 1.3 million in fellowships to our MSW students. And we continue to work with our grade advancement team to work with donors to make sure that we keep getting great funding opportunities for everyone. So that's it for fellowships. The next piece that's unique to the School of Social Work departmental funding are traineeships. So I'm going to have Monse go over some of the traineeships we offer.
Thank you. So traineeships are programs that offer specialized training. So some examples are the Behavioral Health Conditional Scholarship, the Child Welfare Training Program, the Behavioral Health Workforce Development Initiative, or known as WDI. Maybe if you've heard about these already, or you have gone to some of their information sessions. So can you go to the next one, please, Leslie? So you can see some of the purpose, eligibility, funding, and obligation for each one of them. So, for example, for the Behavioral Health Workforce Development Initiative, their purpose is to increase diversity of behavioral health practitioners in Washington, community health agencies. The eligibility is open for incoming clinical students and second-year part-time students. Um, if you are a U.S. resident, you're able to apply. If you are a U.S. citizen, you're able to apply. But also, if you have DACA, if you're documented, you're also able to apply for this program. Their funding is up to 51,500, and the funding is determined based on your need, and they also require you to submit your FAFSA and WASFA. An example of what the requirements would look like after school, after you finish your graduate degree, would be to work in a Washington Community Behavioral Health Agency for 3 years. So as you can see, the Child Welfare Training and Advancement Program also has an obligation to work after you are done with your program. But you can see the difference in each one of them. Something to mention about the Behavioral Health Conditional Scholarship is that it is open to undocumented students. So that one is another really good resource, and they also offer funding. So they all have some info sessions coming up. You can find more about them in the link that Leslie shared if you are interested. There are also recorded info sessions online, and you can find them in that same link that Leslie sent. You can see the information for each one of them. And if you click on them, the information sessions that are coming up will come up, and you can register to go to one of them, just like the one that we are doing today. it's important to look at the information for them or go to their sessions because you can ask them specific questions about the work requirements, other requirements that you may have what as a student. So for example, I am part of the Behavioral Health Workforce Development Initiative, and there are some seminars that I have to attend. My practicum during their first year, I can choose any practicum, but during my second year, I have to choose a practicum that it is approved and it's part of one of their agencies in community behavioral health. So those are things to consider if you are looking into programs like this. And it would be good if you go to their information session so that you can learn more about the deadlines and when to apply because they all have an application. There are also assistantships. They are paid academic employment with tuition benefits. So those who are able to apply are residents, non-residents, documented, and international students. You get paid around 28 hours, not hours, $28 an hour. And they offer either full or partial tuition waiver and health insurance. Some of the examples that we have at the School of Social Work is we have 3 positions for writing tutors. They're not open right now yet. So these are just some of the examples. We also have student information specialist, 2 positions, which would be like my position where I get to do presentations like this and meet with students that are interested in the program. And we also have student computer consultant. So the way to find out about these assistantships are sometimes we send emails to the students that applied to the program or that are registered to receive emails from the School of Social Work. You can also find more information through the Graduate Funding Information Service, UW Hires, Handshake, and you can look for them by looking for assistantships, graduate student assistant, GSA, or academic student employee. Applications are sent via email to admitted students in March, so that's how we would do it, the School of Social Work. You will know if you got an assistantship by April 15th. That is a decision deadline. And for writing tutors are only open for students in their specialized year. So that would be, for example, during the second year of your master's. But yeah. I'll give it back to you, Leslie.
Thank you. So these are some specific opportunities for international students, and by international students, that's specifically students on who expect to be on F1 or J1 visas. So the funding opportunities available to you, while you can't hold a job necessarily, you can have an on-campus job. You're also eligible for assistantships. You are eligible for fellowships and some traineeships, which we showed in that chart, accept international students. And then I'm going to throw it back to Monse to go over some options for undocumented students.
So some of the options for undocumented students are you, instead of applying to the FAFSA, you would apply to the WASFA. The assistantships that I just talked about, for example, if you have DACA, you would be able to apply to an assistantship. There's also fellowships, which are the scholarships that you can also apply to. Some of the traineeships, so for example, the traineeship that I was saying, the Behavioral Health Conditional Scholarship, that is one that you would be able to apply to. There are also other resources like the Leadership Without Borders Center that supports students and helps students to find funding and other resources that they may need. Something to consider about getting a master's in social work as an undocumented student is that you could have your private practice through an LLC. So you wouldn't necessarily need to have a work permit to have your own practice. So that is something good to consider when thinking about what careers you can do in the future.
Great. So while we went over some of the big funding opportunities, we know that when you're thinking about affording grad school in general, there are other types of funding and financial constraints that you might be thinking of. So this is just a short list of some of the resources that UW offers to consider, and we will go into these in depth after if you are admitted. When you're making the decision whether or not to come, we'll go over more of these, but just so you know they exist, and if you want to do additional research on your own, UW does have grad student housing available. There's also UW Hall Health, and you get some subsidized visits every quarter. There's also the UW School of Dentistry. They offer very discounted dental services. The School of Social Work also has a dedicated mental health specialist that offers free counseling. UW also offers emergency aid. They have a food pantry. There are student legal services that offer free, you get a free legal consultation, and then after that, you can get free, or not free, but very discounted legal services. As Monse mentioned, there's also Leadership Without Borders for undocumented students. UW Financial Aid also offers some short-term loans for emergency type situations. There is also the Graduate Funding Information Service. This is only for admitted students, but after you do receive an offer of admission, you can make an appointment with them. It's through UW Libraries, and they have some good resources for things to look for to fund your research or other things like that. And then UW also has a childcare assistance program. Okay, so we are now going to open it up to questions, and we have lots of time for questions, which is great because this is when some of the specifics can be answered. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them into the Q&A. That way we can make sure to get to all of them. And we'll try to get to all of these, and we'll stay on till we answer them. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is being recorded, and will be sent out. So any questions that you have, if you aren't able to stay till the very end to hear the answer, hopefully you can watch the recording later. And then before we get into the questions, you can always email us at uwsocialwork@uw.edu with questions. We also have advising appointments. You can make an advising appointment with Monse or some of our other folks on our admissions webpage. There's also more information sessions coming up that are more specific about the MSW program and different things. So if you have questions about the program itself or application, there are upcoming information sessions and also information on our website that you can look for. So if you've put a question in the chat, please go ahead and copy it over to the Q&A so that we don't miss it. And I will go ahead and just start with the first question I see, which is, to apply as a resident, do I have to be a citizen or a green card holder? So it kind of depends your immigration status, because even some undocumented students can still be Washington residents. Being a Washington resident is something a bit more specific or separate from some of the other immigration statuses. So I can go ahead and put in the chat a link to the residency page that kind of goes into that in detail. It also can apply if you are an enrolled tribal member of a Native American or American Indian or Alaska Native tribe whose lands are historically in the Seattle or Washington state area. You could also qualify for residency. One other thing I'll note, since I'm just talking about residency, is that a lot of folks think like, okay, for my first year, I won't be a resident, but by my second year, I will be a resident and I can pay in-state tuition. However, anyone who is in the state, who is registered for at least 6 credits is considered to be in the state for primarily educational purposes and cannot become or not be considered a resident. So if you do want to or get that residency, For tuition purposes, there are some hoops you have to jump through, a lot of paperwork. You have to basically prove that you are primarily in the state for reasons other than education. So it could be that your spouse moved here or work or any number of things. They have considered more and more now. Also, if you are moving from a state that is potentially restricting your rights, then they have considered that to be potentially another reason to consider offering you residency. But there are a lot of details and nuance to that, and I won't say thank you for putting that in the chat. So questions about residency, I would direct to the registrar's office. They are the experts in that, and the link is in the chat. Okay. Does the part-time online program do summer quarter as well? The part-time program and advanced standing programs go through summer quarter. The full-time program does not do summer quarter. There is a question about the changes to federal loans. So the cap on federal loans of 20,500 starts on July 1st. Does that mean that for the 2026-2027 school year in mid-July? Okay, so you need to, for the program that's getting eliminated, which is the Grad Plus program, is being eliminated on July 1st. That means if you have not received your first disbursement of the loan before July 1st, you will not get that loan. And so if you're in the advanced standing program, typically you will not have received financial aid by July 1st since the advanced standing summer program doesn't begin until later in July. So my understanding is that UW will not offer Grad Plus loans to incoming grad students for this upcoming academic year because of that. So I would, to be safe, I would expect to only receive the one graduate direct loan that is 20,500 per year. You won't necessarily, you aren't guaranteed to be offered that maximum amount of the loan. It really depends on your need, but that is the maximum amount of that federal loan. Question about WDI. So I'm gonna have Monse answer this one.
Yes, it always has been 3 years, but also if you receive funding for less time, then it would be less time that you have to work with an agency that they have to approve. And I will also include the link here so that you can see more information. But it has always been the 3 years if you receive funding for the 2 full years that you are in school.
Great. Okay. I see a question. So question number one is, what is the average student debt load for graduates of the MSW program? And how does the university support students in managing debt? So this is a question we have asked the university for data on. They're pretty protective of students' financial and student financial aid data, which is very understandable. And I actually really appreciate that they do that. So we don't have specifics of the debt load. You can look at tuition and then you can look at the loans being offered. It really depends also your own financial situation, what loans you are offered. And then even if you're offered a certain amount of loans, you don't have to accept them. You can accept part of them, but not all of them. So it really varies. I will mention a couple of slides ago about the traineeships. About a quarter of our students do participate in a traineeship that covers part or all of the cost of tuition. So for many of those students, they do not need to rely on loans. A lot of our lower income students do get those state grants. And so even if they do get the grants though, it doesn't cover the full cost of tuition. So they may be taking loans as well. And similarly, if you've even received a fellowship, even if it covers the full amount of tuition, you still might need money for rent and food. So people still might be taking out loans for that. So all of that to say, it's really difficult to give you a number of the debt load because many of our students are coming from very different places in life where maybe they've been working for many decades and have money saved up, or maybe they're coming straight out of undergrad. But in terms of the university support in managing debt, because most of it is federal loans. In fact, the only loans available through financial aid are federal loans. It's really just the federal processes for debt where you have to like do the course to in order to take out your loans. So there's not really anything specific to the university that they are doing differently, although UW Financial Aid is always offering some resources around that, but otherwise it's really all about the federal loan resources. And then second, how does the university prioritize funding for students and what factors are considering in awarding financial aid? So those are kind of two different pieces. One is funding for MSW students. So if you're talking about departmental funding, meaning the funding that we as the School of Social Work give out to students, that is awarded based on merit and need, depending on the award, sometimes both. And then in terms of financial aid, that's done through the university and it's done through calculations and requirements of the government, and that is all need-based. Um, the university does not offer merit scholarships, so any financial aid you receive is based on need completely. And then to kind of go a little bit more in detail about how we prioritize funding, in case you were wondering, like, does the university prioritize MSW students over like engineering students or something? No, all grad students are treated the same regardless of what program they're in. It's really all about your need and what is in your FAFSA or WASFA. If I didn't fully answer that question, you can put a follow-up in the Q&A as well. And Monse, there is a question here about doing two traineeships. They're interested in CTAP and the Latinx traineeship. I can answer, but if you know the answer, have you?
I can go and then, yeah, you can follow up. So it's a yes and a no because it would be hard to do both. I know for CTAP you do have to have your practicum, which is a time like it's the time that you do your service while you're in grad school. And so with an agency that they approve, so it would be difficult in the sense that for the Latinx traineeship, you have to have at least 25% Latinx clients. So if you are not able to have that with the practicum that you have to do for CTAP, you might not be able to do both. You also have to do seminars and other things for each one of those, so it might be difficult to do both at the same time. Leslie, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, basically the same thing. If you did want to do two, the Latinx traineeship and the Carol Lamar traineeship are the ones that potentially could be easier to tack on to some of the others because they don't have as restrictive funding requirements. But that is also something that if you go to one of their info sessions, they can answer in more specifics as well. Okay. Is the workforce for student well-being traineeship still being offered? So this is a traineeship that supported, it was similar to the behavioral health one, where it covered all of tuition in exchange for working in a high needs public or tribal school after graduating. The Department of Education canceled this program a few months ago. So unfortunately, it is no longer being offered. The general MSW application or info session, we can go ahead and put that information about that. We'll type it in. If there is not one currently listed, be sure to check back or be on our mailing lists to get alerts when we put in new events there as well. Question about how often students get paid practicums. So I'll let Monse answer this because she has a paid practicum.
So it is not as often as we would like. Usually there's around 2 to 3 practicums that are paid, so those are more competitive. But there are some. So not all of them are paid. It's very limited. But there are a couple that you can get paid. For example, the Seattle Indian Health Board, which I am a part of. That one is a paid practicum. So that's one that you could look into once if you end up becoming a student here. But yeah, not a lot of them are paid. It's usually three or four that offer a stipend, and it wouldn't be hourly for the time that you're there. It would just be a stipend.
Yeah, and so there are more paid opportunities in the specialized practicum. So, in the generalist practicum, which are first year full-time students or the second year part-time students, there are fewer paid opportunities, but there are some more in the special once you're in the specialized year. Okay, the deadline for applying for assistantships. It depends on the assistantship. For the School of Social Work assistantships that are available, typically the deadline will be sometime in March. And then for other UW assistantships, it really varies. Sometimes they're posted between May and September, and the applications really vary, unfortunately. There's not like cohesion among all of the assistantships, so that's something that you have to like keep checking in on and keep doing those special search terms for. If you go back and watch this recording, then you can see we have listed some of the UW departments that have in the past hired MSW students. And so you can maybe narrow in on those and keep checking their like email lists or things like that. But there's no one deadline, unfortunately. Okay, Monse is typing an answer to this WDI question, but do you want to also answer it live?
Yeah, so it's I think even if you are doing the advanced standing program, I think it is more than 11 months. They have different time commitments. So for example, for me, I would only receive funding for 3 years, but I would for 2 years, but I would still have to do 3 years or 36 months. So I'm putting in the chat information about them so that you can get more answers to this specific question and maybe attend one of their upcoming information sessions since they have one coming up at the end of the month.
Yeah. And it can be confusing because for the child welfare traineeship or CTAP, their work requirement is you only have to work for them for the amount of time you received the award. So if you're only in CTAP 1 year, you only have to work for them 1 year. But the WDI and some of the other ones are a little different. Okay, if you're a citizen and resident of Washington, do you fill out the FAFSA and WASFA or just FAFSA? So you fill out one and it's up to you to decide which one. The FAFSA will give you the most funding available, unless you are undocumented, in which case FAFSA won't give you any funding and you should do the WASFA. But as a citizen and a resident of Washington, picking one or the other, if you feel comfortable, I would do FAFSA because you could be eligible for more funding opportunity or financial aid opportunities. Will I need to get my transcript evaluated for admission? So this is a question kind of about admissions, and so I'm going to go ahead and skip that one for the second question. As an international student, will we fill out another form for assistantships? No, for international students, it's the same application and the same form to apply for assistantships, just like with fellowships and everything. There's no special one for international students. It's the same for everyone. Is there a list of organizations that qualify for the Washington State Employee Tuition Exemption Program? I don't believe so because it's really just any Washington State agency. Um, and there isn't really one office that manages this assistance or exemption program because it's managed by all of the schools independently. But if you qualify for state employee healthcare or anything like that, then that is a hint that you might be working for a state agency. Like I said, you can be working for local government or city or council or public school, many things similar to that. Also, a lot of tribal employment offers are state agencies. And so they could also potentially offer the exemption program. So unfortunately, that's not a super clear-cut answer. But if you have a specific agency in mind that you have a question about, feel free to email us and we can do our best to answer. Do you guys have a general information session about the MSW program? We have one that is recorded that is up on our YouTube, and we have some coming up. We have one coming up about the part-time program coming up, and we will have another one about the general MSW program in the future as well. So I put in the chat the calendar that we have, but then Monse also just put in the chat where you can sign up to be on our email list. And this way you can get notified whenever there are upcoming info sessions available. So that is all the questions we have, and perfectly, we are right at 7 o'clock. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email us. Our email is up there, uwsocialwork@uw.edu. We'll do our best. Advising appointments are also a great opportunity to learn more about the program and funding opportunities. Like I said, the session has been recorded, so we will be sure to send it out to all registrants, and it will also be on our YouTube for you to rewatch. So thank you everyone for staying with us this evening. And please feel free to contact Monse or myself, and we look forward to hopefully seeing your application this season.